Welcome to the Conditional Release Program, a podcast that delves into the netherworld of cults, crims, and con artists. We don't like these people in the shows. We believe the best way to expose them is to hold them up to a harsh light, point our index fingers in their general direction, and mock them mercilessly, take them down a peg or two until they cease to exist in any other form than the shit on our shoes. I'm Jack the Insider, otherwise known as Peter Hoisted for tax purposes.
And I'm Joel Hill, and today we are looking at some of the worst criminals this country has ever seen. Jack has investigated these men, he's studied them, he's brought in forensic psychologists to analyse them. They're notorious, they're murderous, and thankfully they are all dead.
Well, one is still with us, but we can all sleep soundly knowing he's safely locked away and will remain there for the rest of his life.
Good.
Although he does have that appeal before the courts, and really, he could get out. And I've said some terrible things about him. Maybe we should take him off the list, Joel. Maybe we should take him off the list. Or maybe I'll tell him you made me say all those awful things about him. And my advice to you is to upgrade your personal security and never leave home. We're in this together, Joel, which means you're on your own if the shit hits the fan.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. I don't know
God.
if my home security cameras are going to save me from a trigger-happy lunatic at my door, but we'll get on to these dangerous men in our deeper dive, one of whom might be knocking on my door soon with a gleam in his eye and some hot iron in his hand.
And well, you never know, Joel, you could get an OBE out of this.
About fucking time. Everyone's been hogging the initials for too long, but unfortunately we don't have royal honours in this country anymore, Jack.
Not that OBE, the other OBE, one behind the ear. It's gangster talk, Joel.
Yeah,
For a bit of means a bit of radical brain therapy, makes you fall into a deep sleep forever and ever. But you and I can't go to sleep right now because the world is turning, and every time it turns, something horrible happens, and we have to keep an eye on every bit of it so we can keep our listeners informed and thus safely quarantined from the ugliness. It's time for our weekly news. Lawsuits have kicked off with a bang. Well, more of a sort of desperate whimper, actually. And while Sidney Powell loves to be a brash freedom fighter in public and in her safe space on Telegram, she is clearly shitting herself at the prospect of this lawsuit, and so she should. It's looking pretty fucking grim for her.
Yeah, Trump's former lawyer and general clusterfuck of pseudo-legal psychosis, Sidney Powell, has begun her defense this week by heavily walking backwards on her claims of electoral fraud. I mean, she is moonwalking on this shit.
Yeah.
Generally known as the Fox News defense, where they might need to revisit soon because they've got their own little love letter from Dominion containing a subpoena. She's filed a motion to dismiss the case, based on the idea that no reasonable person would conclude that the statements were truly statements of fact, which is so good. It's a pretty good line. I mean, like, it's got to work.
Well, I was lying then, and I might be lying now. Hell of a defence. One hell of a defence.
I really like it. I think it's got legs. But unfortunately, it would appear that there's about 75 million Americans that could be described quite loosely as unreasonable.
Yeah, there is that. And Powell is in especially deep shit because she's the one that made up the whole Hugo Chavez thing about Dominion being in the pocket of big Venezuela, with orders coming down from the heavens above. Maybe her defence might actually work because this claim was batshit crazy.
Yeah, it really was. They are also, predictably, shooting for a First Amendment get-out-of-jail-free card.
Nice.
And it goes along the lines of, it was clear to reasonable persons, that thing again, whoops, that Powell's claims were her opinions and legal theories.
She was just putting it out there.
Well, legal theory is what from a textbook? Of utmost public concern, which is interesting considering that it's meant to be unreasonable. Anyway, the legal motion then continues to say those members of the public who were interested in the controversy were free to, and did, review the evidence and reach their own conclusions or awaited resolution of the matter by the courts before making up their minds. Okay.
So they're basically using, well, we told them just to do their own research as a legal defence. You know, what could possibly go wrong with that? Powell went out of the courtroom and on her safe space in Telegram basically rendered all this useless by saying the fake news is lying to everyone about our filings in the Dominion case. My position has not changed. We will be taking them to the mat. dragging out the Kraken again, maybe. It's not fake news, though. This is verbatim from the filings, that she's made. Her defence
that she's
is made.
Yeah, this is direct from the black and white. Now, Powell jumped the gun here with the motion to dismiss the claim, but I can imagine this is because she can't sleep at night.
It's just straight up procedural. It's just straight up procedural.
Complete ruin. I mean, you would not be sleeping well knowing that there is a $1.3 billion lawsuit, which is pretty likely to win on top of your head.
1.3 billion US, I must say, Joel. 1.6 billion to poor slobs like us in Australia.
What, in monopoly money? So, essentially, we've got tons of these lawsuits to come. Rudy Giuliani is still waiting for his court date. Mike Lindell is still waiting in the wings. The much less funny Fox News crew lawsuits, I don't really give a shit about that. They're really boring. Lou Dobbs, those sort of guys, they're awaiting their demise. I'm sure Uncle Rupert will pay the bill. But they backtracked a bit on air. They were like, oh, no, we didn't mean it. But the cherry on the Dominion cake, and this is the one that I want to follow, but it seems to have hit a bit of a cul-de-sac. It appears that Melissa Carone has not been given a subpoena. Massive disappointment. Proving the American way of responding to a cease and desist letter by publicly saying, how about you go fuck yourself, can actually work. I'm going to say it. God bless America.
No. Well, I think it's got more to do with the fact that Melissa hasn't got two bob to rub together, and therefore they're going to have a lot of trouble chasing out that 1.3 billion US.
But it would have been funny.
Yeah, but what's the point, What are we going to do? Take your trailer park? Or take the trailer, out of the trailer park? And
I think she's renting.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure she's renting.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure she is renting.
What can you do?
But in other news, we discovered this week that YouTube censorship robots need a bit of WD-40 when we were accused and reprimanded for spreading false information regarding claims of electoral fraud in the US. General Christ.
Fuckers. It's ridiculous.
Saying that string of words is almost certainly going to result in another write-up because their idiot robots can't tell sarcasm, can't determine sarcasm, and have very itchy trigger fingers of their own, or trigger buttons. Whatever robots pull triggers with. They probably pull triggers. They probably train them to pull triggers.
They're doing fucking something because we keep on getting flagged. It's bullshit. It's total bullshit. This time the big tech bastards didn't delete the video permanently on a successful appeal. But the fact that a good portion of our podcast revolves around the idea of mocking these people mercilessly, and then we get taken to shunting yards for fucking pushing election fraud claims. No. What?
We're taking the piss out of these people. YouTube robots. Fuck you, YouTube robots. You fucking scumbag robots. It's hard to know where to kill them. I actually think Hawkins might have been right. And robots will kill us. They're certainly killing me right now.
They're killing us. They're killing our chances of becoming clout chasers. It's bullshit. So I think my theory is that we're just not funny. So the robots detect good humor, and we're just not very good. So that's YouTube
robots. The YouTube strikes keep coming, and we're going to be crying about big tech censorship to everyone that will listen, which isn't many because we're not funny. And then we will ask for donations, which won't be much.
No, we really need to find a better grift, Jack. This is getting a bit tired.
Well, I am working on a couple of things at the moment, Joel, but we won't talk about those right now because there's very strange news coming from the United States.
Yeah, this one seemed to slip under the radar a bit, Jack, but you sent this to me and I'm absolutely dying to know more about what actually happened. But what do we know so far?
This very much smells of red-pilled lunacy. In Lubbock, Texas, earlier this week, a 66-year-old man named Larry Harris, who looks a lot like a mix between Ted Kaczynski and Saddam Hussein, pulled a gun on some unarmed National Guard soldiers transporting the coronavirus vaccine. Harris had been trying to run the vans off the road and did some proper action movie shit to get the vans to stop. He then ordered the 11 soldiers out of the vans at gunpoint and claimed he was a detective for the local Wallopers. Local police rejected this claim and decided to arrest him, where he has stayed at the pleasure of, it's the pleasure, I guess the governor. There's no majesty. No. He's there at the pleasure of the governor.
Yes, probably pleasuring the governor.
In Texas, yeah.
He's a good looking chap.
You never know.
No.
Anyway, the fucking lunatic appears to have missed the obvious conspiracy link, which is that the vans were full of microchip coronavirus vaccine and gone old school. He figured that the van was full of kidnapped kids. Either way, They definitely made this guy take the MAGA hat off for the mugshot. Telling people on the internet that everyone is a pedophile is going to ensure that bizarre stunts like this just keep happening. And while it's pretty juicy that he held up vans transporting the vaccine, that seems like a fun coincidence. But he was going to save the kids because Trump told him to, I guess. Mm-hmm. What a fucking world we live in, Joe. And in other logistics news...
Yep, the world of global shipping is up in arms due to a very fucking big boat blocking the Suez Canal in Egypt. Apparently due to high winds, the very big vessel took a little bit of a spin and found itself stuck, having run into the ground in what is a bizarrely narrow waterway. It's a little bit terrifying that our global supply chains rely on a tiny lake that passes through Egypt. It's about the size of your pool.
It's not. It's probably a little smaller than my pool, actually. It's terrifyingly narrow. And probably responsible for about 40% of the world's commerce.
These are those things that really highlight certain things you didn't know and you sort of didn't want to know. I don't want to know that we are relying for our food by this. So look, it's a bit of a worry. I'm not saying you should buy a shotgun and some canned foods, but I'm also not saying you shouldn't.
Well, look, it has led to some round the Cape of Good Hope stands emerging on the internet, which is a really strange thing all of itself. People are going, "You beauty, we're back on the Cape of Good Hope," with all those storms and shipwrecks. Yes, maybe
the Cape of Good Hope being the detour that they're going to have to do around Africa, where a lot of very quick rubber duckies laden with AK-47 armed lunatics are going to be having a fucking field day.
Now that we mention this, it's the Somalian pirates I feel sorry for. Things are going to be a bit quiet around the Somalian coast with the Suez.
Yeah, they're going to be out of business. Poor bastards.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
tough.
It's ebbs and flows, mate. They're on lockdown. So essentially... Yeah, well, the last time this happened was in 2017 with a Japanese ship that had the decency to be back in motion in just a few hours. So we are essentially uncharted waters.
Yeah, that's really, really terrible joke there, Joe.
Yeah, that's pretty shit.
They are charted waters, by the way. You can see them on a fucking map. This has led to a global shipping nightmare and a lot of memes on the internet. It has also led to some very, very funny conspiracy theories involving the usual suspects, our good friends. The idea that a really big ship could just get stuck in a narrow canal just isn't enough for some people. So how's that playing out, Joe?
All right, so here goes nothing. Literally nothing. This is all bullshit. The shipping company that owns the boat is called Evergreen. That is true. Evergreen was a Secret Service nickname for the one and only Hillary Rodham Clinton. And that is also true. There's not much truth in this one, but those things are real. They check out. Idiots online are saying the boat is called Evergreen, but it's actually called Evergiven. And all their boats are named similarly. It's like Ever something. It starts with the G. It's like a naming convention. But the Evergreen thing has QAnon cocks hard. Real hard. You can see the little boners protruding from their boxer shorts. I mean, they are so fucking wet over this. So the boat's call sign is H3RC, and this is the piece de resistance. HRC, Hillary Rodham Clinton. Now, I'm not getting pilled by this. I'm not sitting here thinking this is a fucking conspiracy, but I do like that.
It is pretty funny.
My antennas are pinging from that. I really like it. So the QAnon bread bakers are taking the crumbs and making the good shit from it. This has become a fucking panko schnitzel. But there's a whole bunch of lunatic links made to Q drops from ages ago that mean fucking nothing. Something about Rotterdam being a sister city to Baltimore, which has something to do with the Sum of All Fears, like a movie with, I think, Ben Affleck was in it. Like, it makes no sense to me. And honestly, I spent a lot of time looking up bullshit on this for the podcast. I'm not going to get in this rabbit hole. I'm just fucking not.
It seems a stretch.
Yeah, I just can't be bothered. I mean, like, it's just too much filtering through Telegram groups to find why the Sum of All Fears is linked by some, 45-year-old lunatic in fucking, Alabama. But they're also saying that Rotterdam is a central location for human trafficking, which, I don't know, may or may not be true. But the chance of them just, inserting this in just for funsies, because it backs up their ridiculous fucking fan fiction story, is huge.
Baltimore cops a rap for no good reason, just because it's a sister city to Rotterdam.
Yeah, exactly. And it's got its own problem. Watch The Wire. Watch every single episode in order.
or backwards.
Yeah. Well, that's actually funny because this whole thing is linked to a fire in a place called Evergreen Court Home for Adults.
Yeah, sure.
Which
That
seems to be linked to this by having the name Evergreen. I don't get that. This is not a revelation. This is not something that's amazing. It's a fucking nursing home. But just like watching The Wire backwards, this is maybe some sort of Benjamin Button thing where like we're torching old guys and trafficking kids. Like, I don't know. The other thing is the boats apparently coming to the rescue are named Baraka 1 and Mossad. Baraka, Baracka.
close enough.
And Mossad, Mosaed, which I'm guessing, like, has the cabal got some sudden dyslexia and just like fucking up the names? What happened to their symbolism being their downfall?
Close
I mean,
enough,
get it
Joel.
right, guys.
Close enough, Joe. Close enough.
Look, I'm not going to go and dwell on the details. That's enough. That's all you really need to know because it gets really boring. There's these links, tenuous links between dumb shit. Look it up yourself if you want. DuckDuckGo will have all the good shit. But the links lead to one thing: trafficking the kids. According to several idiots on the internet who have no real standing in public whatsoever, this is either a military operation to save the children or actual divine intervention. This is like God's work in front of us. The first source I read said this was God intervening in evil. But then most people, I think they probably drew the line there and went, oh, maybe we should pull back on the really crazy shit and just go along with the fact that it's a fucking Q team at the behest of the still president Donald Trump. But essentially, the thing that makes this beautiful, and I love that they're back. Oh, I miss them so much. Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama are behind the whole fucking thing. I mean, look at the boat names. Look at the call sign. The symbolism. The symbolism will be the downfall.
Yes. According to these dipshits, the children are going to be rescued and the whole thing will be revealed to the world live on camera. Again.
Yep.
Just like the executions that never happened, it's all going to be on TV. Sadly, none of these people own TVs, which is a bit of a problem. As Thanos Paniades, in a moment of clout-chasing wisdom, told them all to break their tallies with axes. But I'll be tuned in for sure, if the footy isn't on.
Yeah, well, I mean, footy permitting. Also, Evergreen is apparently a front for human trafficking now, and depending on who you ask, always has been.
Which means that people like our mate in Texas holding up the National Guard vans to save the kids are inevitably going to move their fucking lunatic crosshairs towards Evergreen container ships, which is just going to be great.
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, like, they have enough with Somali pirates and fucking nightmares on the high seas, and now they're going to have a whole bunch of fucking cretinous rednecks waving fucking Confederate flags, jumping on saying, where are the children? I mean, look... The idea that global shipping chains are all just a front for moving kids is because people in this world think their little hobby cult is so important. It surpasses the importance of, say, global trade because these people are just fucking morons. So, look, I just like I say, I'm not looking forward to it. I'm kind of, it'll make a good segment. When all these vessels are hijacked by these morons looking for children in the shipping containers, expecting to have a fucking, like, a festival when they come back, a big motorcade celebrating them saving the children. No, you're going to go to jail. But that's what death cults do.
Well, perhaps there is a bit of hope for our Somalian pirates. I mean, they could be intercepting, and they could be intercepting while some of the QAnon folk are on the boats going to save container ships. The Somalian pirates might say, oh, there's some people we can make a bit of hostage money out of.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as much as we don't value them as people, the US will. And we all know the US will pay top dollar for even the most annoying of fucking...
Oh, they'll hit them with drone. All they'll hit them with drone attacks. One way or the other, problem solved.
Yeah, I fully support that. So, look, and going back to the kids, we were all kids once.
Yes.
Now, I know going from container ship kids to our own childhoods may be traumatic for some, but I just want to say I was never a child. I refuse to believe I was an annoying little fuckwit that did nothing but complain and ask what was for dinner and say irrational things with a small vocabulary. But sometimes when you realize that everyone was just some innocent little kid once upon a time, it makes it even more horrendous to imagine how they got to be a sociopathic killer or, a red pill idiot. Enter Jack and his encyclopedic knowledge of insane criminal figures. If you want a little bit of prep work on this one, go catch episode 5, Monster Children, where Jack talks about the terrible, terrible upbringings, the shitty childhoods that brought them to this point. And honestly, you feel a little bit of sympathy for them until you realize they were fucking like mass murderers. But for now, let's take a week off those lunatics, the red-pilled ones. And let's look at these lunatics, the ones that are mostly dead, in our true crime deeper dive.
Okay, well, we're doing a deeper dive on some of the most violent bastards I've looked at. Criminals in Australia. I've only met two of them, and one of those very, very briefly. The others I've studied and interviewed people who knew them. Now, we don't want to glorify crime or criminals, but these people it's almost from another world, a terrifying world where if you manage to fall into their orbit, you're in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, you don't want to owe these people money. So we have a list of 5 that Jack considers to be the most violent people who've ever set foot in this country. And look, I'm not one to disagree with him. We don't include serial killers or child killers. That's for the fucking true crime creeps to do.
Ooh,
they are terrible people, but they're violent, opportunistic dickheads with fucking pathological bullshit issues. This is more of your gangster trouble. So
yes,
the marker for these people we're about to talk about is why they were genuinely feared by their criminal peers. They're gangland figures. They're not the kind of people who would go again the squareheads, as they like to call them, the normies.
Squareheads, yeah, normies, yeah.
They're the sort of men who kill strategically, and they kill to boost their fearsome reputations, protect their business interests, and generally get a foothold and keep a foothold in the bountiful proceeds of crime. These are the sort of men who terrified already terrifying people, which is a mountain of being terrifying.
Yes, indeed it is. And so, look, in order to add a little bit of dramatic a dramatic suspense or a state of suspense.
True crime loves that shit.
I've created a list of 5 that I've looked at perhaps really closely. And at number 5, we have John Frederick Chow Hayes. Now, Chow was a Sydney gangster, certainly around the same time as Squizzy Taylor, who many listeners would know of. There have been fucking operas written about Squizzy Taylor, but there's very little been written about Chow Hayes, except for a biography that was written prior to his death. I'll talk about that briefly. But he was born in 1911. Pretty rough time to be born in Sydney. His father was actually a member of the Light Horse, the Australian Light Horse, and he was when World War I broke out, and off he went to serve. Chow Hayes had another serious male figure in his life, and that was his grandfather, who died of bubonic plague.
Oh,
so this is, no strong male role model figures for Chow. After the war, by the way, Chow's father was so badly damaged psychologically by the war that the only time Chow saw him was with his father wearing a straitjacket in an asylum.
Brutal.
So that's the only time he ever met his father, apparently.
It's not perfect.
He started off knocking off a bit of gear in and around Central Station. He was basically called suburbs like Glebe and Darlinghurst and Surrey Hills his backyard.
Places we can't afford to live now.
Yeah. But in those days, they're horrific slums. As I said, bubonic plague. There were outbreaks of bubonic plague in Woolloomooloo.
Bring out your dead.
and in the dreadful slums of Frog Hollows in Surrey Hills. That have been torn down now, I think, about 6 times. And I don't know, I'd go looking at them in about 5 years because they could be slums again.
They're ghosts.
Look, Chow was a standover man. And he emerged understanding one thing, that if you were the most violent person in the room, you were gonna make a lot of money. And so as an emerging crook, he bashed one Sydney gangster, more senior in the chain, bashed him mercilessly. Talks about waiting outside for 5 hours and had taken off his singlet and had wrapped it around a metal pole, because at this stage they're starting to become worried about fingerprints. Beat the shit out of this guy, Joe Green his name was, and put him in hospital for about 6 months. And that was when Hayes then he's 18 or 19, has decided, he's going to be an extremely violent man. He was responsible for at least 5 murders that we know of, and the most famous of these was the murder of Bobby Lee in 1954. And the story is just astonishing. Chow, he had a gang, of course, around him that among other things, they were employed at the Two-Up School in Surrey Hills, and they were employed as the sort of muscle, Tomo's Two-Up, it was known as, in various locations around Surrey Hills, constantly moving. But there was a huge Two-Up schools where literally thousands of men would gather, particularly on a Thursday night, pay night, and punt on Two-Up. Bobby Lee's men were charged as the sort of bouncers, and if there was a punch up, Bobby Lee's men would jump in and sort out blokes and throw them out.
Sort them out, yeah.
Chow had a gang too, as I say, but Chow was paid another, so that was part of the extortion racket. If there was any trouble of a gun or of a gun nature, then Chow would come down with the gun. So a bit of a punch up, Bobby Lee would take care of it and his men. But if things got pretty serious, then Chow would come down with the guns. And Chow's gang was at Tomo's Two-Up, and Bobby Lee's men ripped into them, gave them a bit of a touch up, bit of a hiding. And Bobby Lee would have known this. He was a boxer himself and a bit of a heavy, and he realised that Chow Hayes would retaliate, because he always did at the slight, not so much the injury that some of his gang got, but at the slight, the personal slight that he'd received from Bobby Lee. So they were, men that had basically decided to go toe to toe, and Bobby Lee got in first, or he tried to. And went around to Hayes' home in Glebe with a gun. It was either Bobby Lee or one of his men. And they looked inside. Let's say it was Bobby Lee. We certainly did in a television program. It may have been one of his henchmen, but we'll stick with the fact that it was Bobby Lee. Looked into Chow's home through the window, saw a male figure sitting in front of the radio, listening to the radio in an easy chair, and let rip and shot the bloke dead. But it wasn't Chow Hayes, even though it was Chow Hayes' home. Yep. It was in fact Chow Hayes' nephew.
Yeah, and king, don't miss.
He's shot dead. So Bobby Lee realises then that he's in terrible trouble. He goes into hiding. I've seen photographs of the funeral of Hayes' nephew, and there are women just wailing at the cemetery, and Chow's just standing on his own with this look on his face like he's about to go nuts. At this stage, 1954, he's come to the end of really 30 years as a violent standover man, and he knows that there has to be retribution.
Yeah, you can't let this slip.
Can't let this go at all. So they put out the feelers. Hayes and his men put out the feelers. Where's Bobby Lee? Where's Bobby Lee? Let us know where Bobby Lee is. And about 6 weeks go by from after the shooting of the nephew, and Chow takes a call at his home, and he's told that Bobby Lee is going to be at a nightclub in Market Street in the CBD. The nightclub's an interesting one. Just briefly, it was a drag act, and even in those days in Sydney, 1954, these things were very popular. And sort of Sydney was one of those cities that was. Homosexuality was illegal and so forth. There were still pubs and places where homosexual men could meet, and it was sort of, everything was sort of everyone looked the other way. But it is an interesting thing, because Sydney was like this, and Melbourne and Brisbane weren't. Anyway, so they're ready to go and kill Bobby Lee at this club. And Hayes rings up his offsider, and that's a bloke by the name of Joey Hollowbone. And he says, we're going to go and sort out Bobby Lee once and for all tonight, and get around here at 8 o'clock, and we'll get down there. So Joey Hollobone, unbeknownst to Chow, Joey Hollobone's wife thinks Joey Hollobone is having an affair. And she's very, very worried about it. And when she asked Joe Hollobone, "Where are you going?" he said, "Well, we're going to the club. We're going to a nightclub, Chow and I." And he said, "Well, I'm coming too. You've got to take me." Because she starts to put it on that, you're having this affair, and I don't believe you anymore. I'm coming with you. And so she goes. So she's in the car with Joey, and they pull up outside Chow Hay's place. Chow Hay's wife looks out and she says, "Well, if she's going, I'm going too."
For fuck's sake.
So the four of them arrive at this club in Market Street.
This is frustrating.
It's a downstairs club. So they move downstairs. There's about 70 people there. And the four of them are sitting having a drink. And Chow is basically glaring at Bobby Lee. Bobby Lee's there. Bobby Lee's talking to about 6 or 8 men at another table. And Chow's just glaring at him. And from the other side of the room, Bobby Lee knew he was there, and Bobby Lee was sort of glaring back and giving him shit. And Chow just said to Hollobone, he said, "You take the women outside, and I'll sort this out now." So and Chow walked across the room. He approached Bobby Lee, and Bobby Lee. These are the most famous last words of any Australian criminal. Bobby Lee says to Chow Hayes, "You're not going to shoot me in front of all these people, Chow." And Chow just goes bang, 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 blows him off his chair, and then sits over him and empties the rest of it into him. And then it's just pandemonium, and they all run away. Everyone in the club disappears. Of the 70 or 80 people that were there that night, not one of them would come forward to give evidence against Chow Hayes. There were 2 criminal trials that led to mistrials or hung juries. And then finally, the corrupt New South Wales police officer, Ray Kelly, says to Chow, "I'm going to charge your wife if you don't plead guilty." And Chow finally does.
Ooh,
and pleads guilty because he was terrified that his wife would be charged of being an accessory after the fact of the murder. And so he pleads guilty and is sentenced to hang after his many run-ins with the law, many minor jail sentences. He's basically sentenced to hang. He doesn't hang, of course, because the New South Wales Labor government repealed capital punishment in the 50s, and Bill Leake, who painted the portrait sits on my wall, Chow Hayes.
It does.
Looking over me.
Terrifying.
It's vaguely terrifying.
It's really intense.
You don't look at that portrait and say, "There's a kindly old man."
He has shark's eyes.
Yeah.
Shark's eyes. They're dead. Dead eyes. Anyway,
Bill Leake described him as like a lizard, that he would only blink every sort of 10 seconds or so, once. Yeah. And that was about it. Right. So he didn't hang. Bill did ask him. He said, "You ever had any sort of political leanings?" He goes, "Well, no, I never voted in my life, but I gotta love the Labor Party who just said spared him the trapdoor."
Very, very. I believe later when he was asked whether he deserved to hang, he said probably.
Oh, look, there's so many great stories about Chow. Just incredible stuff. He ended up just becoming a sort of sad old man in prison to a large degree. He did 20 years for the murder of Bobby Lee, gets out in the 1970s, has no skills, in this new world. And so his way of making money was he'd go to a sort of local TAB and just stand there and walk up to people and go, "Give me $50.
That
was.
Was he old now?
But he's old.
He's old and useless.
He goes to jail again after glassing a young bloke in a pub and gets another 4 or 5 years, and then he gets out in 1977. His story becomes told because he'd been this gangster figure really from the 1920s all the way into the mid-1950s where he goes away for his biggest jail. Just an extraordinary character that tells an amazing story of Sydney and just how tough it was.
Yeah, so that's nothing to do with it. I like Sydney now. I can't afford to live here, but at least I'm not being fucking harangued and shot.
I
I'm not
guarantee
being
you.
stood over.
I guarantee you that part of Sydney is now a lot nicer than it used to be. Look, that's number 5, John Frederick Chow, extraordinary character. I could talk about him all day. Number 4 is Christopher Dale Flannery, Rentakill, an extraordinary bloke, a contract killer. Chow was a standover man. Christopher Dale Flannery is a contract killer. He was born in 1948. He was the youngest of 3 children. His brother went on to become a lawyer and very, very well respected, particularly the Victorian Trades Hall Council.
Oh, okay.
His sister was a nurse.
These are both really useful. You got the nurse to patch people up. You've got the fucking lawyer to get you out of trouble. I mean, this is a great outfit.
And he sort of did use them, but they were clean skins. The lawyer in particular, his brother Peter, the lawyer in particular. Flannery, well, as being the youngest, his father left the home. The father was known to be a very violent human being, and when he took off, and I think the story goes that the mother, who was an Irish woman, very, very strong woman, but punted him out of the house because he's a violent, drunken bastard. But it put Flannery on as a teenager on a bit of a sort of youth crime spree, knocking off stuff out of shops and gets done for motor vehicle theft. He goes down as a youth to the Morning Star. The Morning Star youth, it's not a hostel. I mean, it was a youth incarceration centre run by
backpackers.
Yeah, run by the Franciscan monks and
shittest backpackers ever.
He's known to have been sexually assaulted there. So by the time he's 15, and he's gone off the deep end. He's been raped by a priest, and we know this because he told some of his peers about this in Pentridge later on.
Yeah.
Flannery, by the time he's 19, is convicted of rape, and he goes to jail for a fair time there. And meets everyone in jail.
Good.
He goes into Pentridge, and then because of misbehaviour, he goes into H Division. And this is another really incredible thing about him. He refuses to take any nonsense from the guards in H Division, who were just brutal sadists. And he went on strike, basically took all his clothes off one day and said, that's it for me. I'm pulling the pin. You can't make me do anything.
Pulling the pin. Good pun.
Through his brother, the lawyer, there were a number of, it led to a parliamentary inquiry into conditions in H Division. A number of prison guards were sacked. And the place had to basically drag itself out of the 17th century,
that's it. Yeah.
And so Flannery was regarded as a bit of a hero among a lot of prisoners, and there are people that I've spoken to who spent time in jail with him, who hold him in very high esteem on that alone, and just his sheer courage and bravery. Look, he was involved in a number of armed robberies and got pinged for a couple of them. He's released from jail from the rape, and then he gets involved in a number of armed robberies. He gets pinged for a couple of them, and he says to one of his cellmates, "Look, I'm not very good at robbing banks. I think I'll kill people for a living." And that's essentially what he did. He committed his first murder that we know of in 1980. It was in 1980, and that formed the basis of a huge criminal trial. He was charged for that, but he was ultimately acquitted.
Okay.
He was then transported up to New South Wales, where he was charged with another murder that had occurred subsequently, and he was charged with the murder there. He was bailed immediately and put into the company of one. Well, I won't say his name, but his senior detective was Roger Rogerson, and Roger Rogerson and Flannery had been involved earlier on in a very violent arrest where Rogerson arrested Flannery. Flannery basically would kill anyone for $50,000. That was in. He wouldn't drop his price for anyone.
Well, it's back then money too, so like $50,000. But you could actually buy something with $50,000 back then.
yeah.
Now it's half an Audi.
50,000. Look, we know this because he was a conversation with Dr. Jeffrey Edelston took place that was recorded from a car phone, from his car phone, where he was talking to his medical secretary about a young man that he'd just met, which was Christopher Dale Flannery, and Roger Rogerson had done the introductions. And Flannery was facing trial for the murder of Ray Loxley, the one that he'd been extradited to New South Wales for. And they were basically trying to work out a way of him avoiding that trial or having it suspended, not to have this particular judge look at it.
Yeah.
And so Edelston had been approached because he'd been doing tattoo removal, and in one case at least, he had removed tattoos of a criminal figure in Sydney who was very unhappy with the level of scarring that he'd got from the removal, and he'd been threatening Edelston. So Edelston had this conversation with the intros done by Rogerson. As this Flannery, he said, Flannery says 50,000 to kill him. He says, well, I don't want to kill him. I just want to have him beaten up. He goes 10,000. He said, well, that's still, Edelston says to him, that's very expensive. And Flannery says, cricket stumps aren't cheap. Not cricket bats, interesting. It obviously used cricket stumps as a sort of weapon for beating people up. As it stood, that assault never took place, but Edelston had provided evidence to the court that Flannery couldn't stand trial because of a infection from tattoo removal. A very similar story, and Flannery avoided that particular trial and that particular judge. He was subsequently acquitted of the trial a couple of years later, not long before his disappearance, because basically the chief medical officer who was going to give evidence against him had died, and so the judge
died like mysteriously, or
no, it was not that I know of, but he'd passed away in the meantime.
Convenient.
So all of the evidence against Flannery for the murder of Loxley was a lot of it wouldn't stand up. A lot of physical evidence just wouldn't stand up. So the judge directed the jury to acquit. Flannery did a number of murders, probably 12. That sort of figure. It's very difficult to work out, and perhaps we'll explain as we go. Probably the most chilling one, I think, was when he murdered Sarah Smith and Terry Basham in Murwillumbah. They were painters and dockers, or Terry was, and painter and docker who were involved in drug dealing, and they decided that they were going to help themselves. So they were, set up business on their own. So the people who ran them organised for Flannery to kill them both, so 50,000 a head. And when Flannery went around to their home, he drove from the Gold Coast to Murwillumbah. We know this because he was in a restaurant. He met people in a restaurant and then paid for the restaurant bill with his credit card later in the day. In the meantime, he disappears to Murwillumbah, having created his alibi, and then goes to the home of Basham and Smith. He shoots them both dead. They have a young child. And a child is 2 years of age, but Flannery doesn't kill the child. He basically puts the child in the cot, and somehow or other, probably from a call from Flannery, Smith's father, the child's grandfather, was alerted and drove down from Brisbane about 24 hours later to rescue the child, basically left there with his dead parents.
Honour among hitmen.
Yeah, well, there was a little bit of that. In the end, Flannery was working as a bodyguard for George Freeman. We are getting into the Sydney gang wars of 1984-85 now. Flannery is, in January of 1985, there's an attempt on Flannery's life where a gunman comes past and lets rip with an AR-15, an automatic weapon at least, and Flannery is actually hit in the webbing of his thumb and gets a nick across the year. Flannery was out with his daughter and his stepson. They just returned from a club, and his wife. And there was a machine gun spray as a car sped past. Flannery became convinced that the shooter was another Sydney criminal who I won't name, and basically decided on a revenge. And at that time, there were two groups running around. There's Freeman and the old school, known as the Team, and there was this new group of villains who were wealthy with heroin trafficking money. Flannery ultimately spent the last 3 months of his life in an amphetamine haze. His thumb constantly ached from the bullet wound that he'd sustained in January. He is suspected of killing a man by the name of Tony Eustace in April of 1985. Eustace was shot 6 times in the back near the Sydney airport, the old Hilton Hotel. Very famous. You're talking about last words there. He was dragged into hospital, Tony Eustace, Spaghetti Tony Eustace, sometimes known as Champagne Tony Eustace. He had a restaurant in Double Bay. He was told as he was dragged into emergency, 2 police officers approached him and said, "Tell us who did this, tell us who did this." And Eustace said his last words, "Fuck off." And that was that. He was going to go to the grave not letting on who it was. It's always been put on Flannery's feet that he was involved in that murder, but there are other theories about that.
Maybe that was the person who did it. Like the guy asked, he's like, "Fuck off." He's like, but who killed? He's like, "Fuck off." And he's like, "But who killed me? Fuck off." The guy's name was Fuck Off.
People that I've spoken to who knew Flannery said that he could actually be a very agreeable sort of fellow. He's always really well dressed.
He worked nice at dinner.
While he was on the run, he worked in the menswear department of the David Jones store in Perth. So he's always well dressed and quite a good looking guy. One bloke I spoke to said, "Look, he was, we were sitting. It was in a club in Double Bay, and they were having a drink. And he said, look, he was a really nice guy." And then Flannery's wife turned up, and Flannery just became enraged, and then he was just a terrifying human being to be anywhere near. He had sworn a terrible vengeance for the shooting offence at his Arncliffe home in January, and he just couldn't be pulled up. The Sydney gang wars were underway. And the really serious, the senior figures like McPherson and Freeman and others were living in fear. No one was doing any business, and really they figured ultimately that Flannery was the one that if he went, everything could calm down again. And so he disappeared on May 9, 1985. He was last seen leaving an apartment block in Liverpool Street in the CBD, or just outside opposite Hyde Park, and that was the last time he's seen. I believe he was murdered by Stan Smith, who we'll get to shortly, and he was murdered at Freeman's home. That's pretty much putting the pieces together and talking to very senior police who investigated his disappearance for the National Crime Authority. That's what they said, that basically he went to Freeman's house. Freeman had told him that he had a machine gun that he wanted him to use and go and wipe out all the villains on the other side once and for all. And Flannery went down there, couldn't start his car in the car park of this apartment block. Long story short, it's likely that he got into a taxi. It's likely that he drove to the airport. It's likely that he rented a car there. And because he used to rent cars from the airport all the time, and then he drove to Freeman's house. Ultimately, the car would have been returned. No one saying anything about it. I actually, interviewed a police officer and said, "Did anyone ever check rental car records at Sydney Airport on that day?" And no one ever did. So Flannery just disappeared. That was the way it was. He was basically, I believe, shot dead at Freeman's house by Stan Smith, rolled up into a carpet, taken out beyond the heads and dumped. And that's kind of how Mr. Rentakill found his end. He's number 4. Gee whiz, this has taken a long time. Number 3.
It's all right. As long as it's good.
Number 3. My God, this is just a terrible, terrible human being. This is Nick Rodham, known as the Bulgarian and sometimes the Russian. He was Bulgarian, not Russian. before he arrived in Australia, it's likely that he was a wrestler. And the Bulgarians are very strong for Olympic type wrestling, not your Hulk Hogan jobs,
Okay.
And very often these wrestlers, like boxers, are certainly in our sort of place, and in British organised crimes, it's often ex-boxers, or in this case, in Bulgaria's case, ex-wrestlers were used as sort of hard men. And that's likely his background. They know that he'd been in prison in Turkey and in Bulgaria before he arrived in Australia. And he arrived in Australia under very mysterious circumstances. Basically he arrived, he had a significant criminal history in Bulgaria and Turkey, as I say, but he arrived in Australia with a clean sheet.
Yeah, clean slate here.
When he arrived, he committed murder almost as soon as he arrived, and that was a sort of identity theft murder. There was a fellow, an actual Russian fellow who worked at the Ford motor plant in Broadmeadows in Melbourne. And Rodham had assumed his identity and committed a number of offences in this guy's name.
Cheeky.
And it was a bit cheeky, and then the Russian fellow found out about it and confronted him, and well, he's never been seen again. He basically just didn't turn up for his scheduled shift at Ford, and never been seen again. And his name is Sergei, and he sort of looms large after that. Rodham was a standover man, and as with Chow he realised that the more violent, more terrifying he could be, the better that would be for him. He was involved.
The more money you'd make.
He was involved in major drug trafficking and major drug supply. When 2 police officers were shot dead in Melbourne, the Silk Miller murders, the number one suspect in this was Rodham. It turned out not to be Rodham, but Rodham was under police, basically the shadows, the interceptors were looking after him, keeping an eye on him all the way through. I interviewed a fellow by the name of Sedat Silan, who was a very small, sort of mousy-looking Turkish-Australian guy who ran a mobile phone business. I looked into Sedat a fair bit. He had a significant criminal history for fraud-type offences, dishonesty offences, and Sedat fell into the orbit of Nick Rodham at Loddon Prison in Victoria. He'd arrived for sentencing after some fraud-type offences, and that's where he met Rodham. And Rodham's sidekick at the time, Sam Hayes, who's another nasty piece of work. And they sort of took him under his wing. They took this Sedat Silan under his wing because they realised he had a bit of money, or he'd have access to it, and even if it was black money. Yeah. So basically, it was an incredible story of grooming, where Rodham said, "Look, I need you to buy a car off me, and I'll borrow some money off you," and it was always repaid with interest, those sorts of things, So
order amongst thieves.
Yeah, well, it was just to develop. It was grooming. It was just to develop
Yeah, that checks out.
Yeah, just to develop a sense of trust with him. They both got out of jail, and Rodham had this habit of ringing up Sedat Silan at midnight and say, let's come out. And Sedat Silan tells stories about going to some disused warehouse and walking in there. There's just Russian guys everywhere, and there's stolen suits, Hugo Boss, Armani, all that sort of stuff.
What a bizarre thing to steal.
Yeah. Well, it's quite lucrative, really. You can, a $1,500 suit or $3,000 suit you can sell for $500. And so
anything that's not nailed to the floor, I suppose.
Well, that's right. These are guys were thieves. So basically, Sedat told that story. He said he went back to that warehouse the following day, and everything was gone. I mean, nothing was there, and they were sort of Russian mobsters, and Rodham was sort of in with them. Sedat Silan tells another story of Rodham picking him up in his Mercedes, in his 2-door Mercedes, SL500 Mercedes, and saying, let's go for a run. And, Nick Rodham used to drink brandy, used to drink the best brandy, connoisseur brandy that you could
Isn't that
buy.
cognac?
Cognac, sorry, yes, he was a big cognac man.
Good brandy's cognac, right?
Yeah, so he's drinking $300, $400 bottles of cognac, and he'd drink two at a time. Basically, they're driving down the road. He's had two bottles of cognac and a bottle of scotch. Jesus. And driving down the Tullamarine Freeway in this very fast car, doing about 180 kilometres per hour, so that Salane reckons. They get pulled over by the police. Rodham has got with him an unlicensed pistol. He's got half an ounce of coke. He's shit-faced drunk. And the two sort of traffic guys sort of wander up to the one. One of them wanders up to the car and said, do you have any idea how fast you were going, sir? And he said, well, I haven't got a fucking clue because I'm fucking shit-faced. and so they go, okay, we better go and ring this one through. And so that's the land describes how they're just basically waiting there for about half an hour on the shoulder of the Tullamarine Freeway. And then finally, the guy comes back, Rodham had given him a fake license. They'd run it through, and they were waiting for a good half an hour, and then they came back and just handed him his license. You can just go, sir. All right then, sir. Just keep an eye on that, speed there. Yeah. Half an ounce of coke in the car, gun, enough stuff to get you put away for at least a year. But
it does look like a fun night, though. I mean, guns, coke, drink.
So that says, as they pull away, with Rodham still driving shit-faced drunk, saying, well, if you ever wondered if you were the subject of a task force, you can stop wondering now. Because the traffic blokes had rung it through and they've been told, don't arrest him, we need to get him on something really serious. Yeah, and that serious thing would happen. Yeah. So that Salane got a call, another midnight-based call, and Rodham said to him, I've got some friends from Russia, want to know about mobile phones, come over and see us, and they were in a 5-star. Stay in a 5-star hotel. So it was room 708, I think it was, but don't quote me on that. And so Sedan drops over and knocks on the door, room 708, if that was it, and the door opens and there's Russian goons everywhere, and they just beat the shit out of him.
What?
And Rodham's just sitting there with the hotel with the hotel dressing gown on, cognac, coke, cigar, and he's just holding up a piece of paper that says $120,000. That's what you owe me. You owe me $120,000. And I said to Sadat, I said, well, did you owe him that? He said, no, but he probably did, or it was at least black funds that Sadat had obtained by fraud and deception.
Okay.
And Rodham wanted it. So they beat him. They beat him for 9 hours, right?
Jesus.
And breaking for every now and then to give him a line of coke and then wash him up, clean him up in the bathroom and then send him out again. And Rodham said 120,000. He wouldn't even say it. He just hold up the little piece of paper, 120,000. And no, I don't have a bang crash. This went on for hours. So that's the land said, I realised I was never going to get out of there alive unless I said to him, look, I'll give you 20 now. I'll transfer 20 into your account. I'll give you the 100 in a week. So they let him go, long story short. And so that says, well, in a week I'm going to have to deal with this, right? So yeah. I said, well, why didn't you go to the police? And he said, well, that wasn't going to help. I needed to do my own thing. So that's the land tells this story where he obtains a firearm, a pistol himself, and he waits for Nick Rodham to turn up at his home, which happens promptly in a week. And Rodham turns up with a pit bull. He's got a pit bull on a leash. He's got his gun and his phone down his tracksuit pants, and he bangs on the door. The door's open, but the screen door's locked. And Salane comes up and pulls the pistol on Rodham, and through the screen door fires from about a metre away, empties the gun, 8 shots, bang, 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 bang. And when the dust and noise or cloud of smoke clears, Rodham has not been hit once, not from one of these shots. So But he said, look, the dog was the first one to piss off as soon as he started firing.
That's
bang.
it. Yeah.
And then one of the shots had actually gone across the road and gone into an apartment, gone into a block of units, and it had whacked on the wall above where this woman and her daughter were sleeping. So she's rung the cops. The cops come around. They arrest Sadat Salan and they tell him. Well, Sadat Salan tells them the story about the torture in the Melbourne hotel. They go to the room, they do blood tests, and they say, okay, well, your story checks out.
Yeah, fair.
And we want Nick Rodham, and you're going to help us get him. And so they arrange Sadat Salan arranges another place where they would drop off the money, where Rodham would come and collect the money. He says, Sadat Salan says that they come from an in-law and go to his place, and the place is in Kew in Melbourne's eastern leafy suburbs. But Rodham's given the address, but he goes to the wrong place. You know, there's special operations group waiting for a very violent arrest at one house, and Rodham goes into the house next door. He goes to the wrong place, and he knocks on the door. And this little old lady, there he is with his gun. His gun and his phone and his tracksuit pants,
just casual.
And the old lady, you know, she answers the door. Can I help you? And that's when the special operations group move in, but they can't shoot him because they're using full metal jackets. It'll just kill her too. So they have a very, very long, tense process where they finally make a violent arrest. So Sadat Salan has done his job. Nick Rodham has been arrested, a very, very tense and violent arrest. Sadat Salan goes on to commit a $2.6 million fraud on the Commonwealth, on the ATO. And that perhaps is a story for another time, but all I can tell you is if you're an exporter and you put on your BAS statement that you're owed $180,000, the ATO will pay you in about 3 days. Well, they did with Sadat Salan. In the end, the fraud totaled $2.6 million.
Jesus.
Sadat is an inveterate con artist. He's doing a bit of time at the moment as we speak, actually, for ripping off a bloke and was jailed for, I think, 5 years and 3 months in June 1920. So Rodham is in custody and he's chained to a table, not chained to, but handcuffed to a table. And he meets for the very first time a police detective, a detective senior constable with the organised crime squad, Ben Archbold. As I say, Ben is a lawyer now, criminal lawyer in Sydney. I've met him and spoken with him about this on a number of occasions. They're asking Rodham all sorts of questions. This is the one they want to put him away for a very, very long time. And they're looking at his tattoos and they're asking all sorts of questions. Rodham is super violent, spitting and carrying on.
Yeah, being a prick.
And Archbold says to him, he mentions the first murder that Rodham has committed when he's arrived, the Ford worker, Sergey.
Yeah.
And he says, I know you did it. And I'm going to prove it, and I'm going to put you away for it. And Rodham just becomes enraged at that stage. He is subsequently charged with kidnap and abduction type offences, and he's locked up, but he gets bail. Yeah. He gets bail, which is one of those really strange things, but he's bailed on the abduction kidnapping charges that relate to Sadat Salan's torture. And he's basically sworn to kill Ben Archbold. He has taken it upon himself to kill the police officer, Ben Archbold. And this begins a sort of terrifying months-long process for Ben, where he sleeps in a different house every night with a gun under his pillow.
As you would.
Well,
these aren't empty threats.
This is Nick Rodham, you know. This guy's going to come after you. And one of the sort of the side stories is the failure of the Victoria Police Force to properly protect Ben, and it goes on. But Archbold is terrified, and I interviewed Ben's father, Peter, who's a publican in Toorak. And he told the story. He told the story of how Rodham came into Peter Archbold's pub looking for Ben, Rodham was there handing him $100 notes to put into the TAB machine and saying, "Where's your son? Is your son here?" He said, "Well, no, he's not here. He doesn't live here." And he knew it was something very dangerous. So Rodham eventually leaves, and from a telephone intercept that we know of, Rodham got onto the phone to a Western Australian criminal, well-known drug dealer, and tells him that he has a hand grenade in his pocket, and he was going to let rip. If Archibald Ben had been in the pub, in Peter's pub, his father's pub, he would have let rip with a handgun, with a hand grenade. So that's the sort of violent human being he was. When his end came, it came through sheer greed, of course. He was very, very keen, always keen, constantly asking Carl Williams, who was the pill king of Melbourne at the time, "Who's your cook? When do I get to meet your cook? I want to meet your cook. When do I get to meet him?" And Carl knows what that's all about. He knows he's going to basically Rodham's just going to abduct his cook and have him cooking there, and have him cook for Nick instead. Basically, Williams tired of it. And he basically arranged for Rodham to be murdered. And the way in which to get Rodham going in one particular place was to say, "Okay, you can come and meet the cook today." So Rodham and Williams leave a cafe in Brighton, and they head to Coburg. And Rodham gets out of the car. There were two of his sidekicks there as well. A car sped past and shot him dead just as he was in the front yard of this home in Coburg. Shot him multiple times. I could name the people in the car. One of them was Benji Vanyaman. The other I cannot name. He is still name suppressed by the Supreme Court. But anyway, Rodham has been shot dead, believing that he was going to be meeting Carl Williams' cook. Carl Williams and his father, they're both dead now. They were around the corner watching it from another car. And finally, this horrible human being, Nick Rodham, was finally dead. And his two sidekicks see him shot dead in the front yard of this house, and they look at each other and go, "We know where his money is." And so they just jump in the car and go and rob him blind.
How perfect.
He's dead, of course, so he's certainly not going to back up on it.
No.
Rodham was buried like many of these fucking characters. He was buried in the $50,000 gold-plated coffin. And we would have seen, students of the Melbourne Gang Wars would have seen so many of these funerals. Vanyaman was another one. They all had the gold-plated $50,000 coffins, and they all had huge crowds there. But when Rodham died, there were only a handful of people.
Really?
3 or 4 people. Really.
Old Nicky No
He was
Mate.
so despised, feared, and then when dead, despised. And so they could barely get the pall bearers, and you needed quite a few of them for the $50,000 gold-plated coffin.
Fucking A.
You can't just do that with 4 blokes. So they could barely get the pallbearers together for Nick Rodham. Such a fucking
More money than
human
mates.
being was.
That's pretty sad.
And then, look, I guess if nothing else, that proves that crime doesn't pay.
Not in Friends.
You can't. Yes, with Nick Rodham,
It gets you a gold-plated fucking coffin, though.
Well, yeah, but crime doesn't pay.
I don't have one of those.
Crime doesn't pay, but in the case of Nick Rodham, he did save a few bob on the catering. Because there were not that many of his funerals.
There.
This is a bloke who, while standing over a sunshine drug dealer, went to his home while this man's wife and children were there and raped this fellow in front of him.
Oh, Jesus.
This is a horrible, horrible human being who just decided he would be more violent than anybody else. And in the end, he copped his right whack in Queen Street, Coburg on the 15th of April 2003. Now, we have 2 to go. Listeners, we have 2 more to go, and we are not going to rush this. We want to talk about these people in
We're going to take our dear sweet time. We
Sweet
could not
time
quite
telling about
get through
how
the full 5.
horrible these people were.
Two more.
We have done, yes, we've done John Frederick Chow Hayes, Christopher Dale Flannery, Rentakill, and Nick the Bulgarian Rodham.
Well, we've got 2 more left.
We've got 2 to go.
We're going to get there.
And
we're going to get there.
We're going to do that. We're going to really say, we're going to let you be a bit upset. We're going to say, to be continued.
We've done it again.
We have. It is a shame.
Well,
but we don't want you sitting and listening for 4 hours of me babbling away. So we're going to get to me babbling away for another hour or so. Next
and I
week.
have to fucking edit this too, so I'm gonna go and lick my wounds. So basically, we've got the 2 yet to come. And speaking of yet to come, we move to Eric Trump because he knows how sex works in theory, but after hearing his dad talk about it with his mates, he's never quite got there. Lara, his wife, is eternally thankful for this. After seeing the disappointment in Donald's face when speaking of Eric, she doesn't want a mistake of her own. The man has much better genes, but Eric, oblivious to the entire thing, just keeps on trucking on, just keeps on going, and despite his challenges, he just gets by. He gets by a lot like a bastard on Father's Day.
Excellent news this week for Eric Trump. Look, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but Eric, the idiot failed son of the 45th President of the United States of America, might soon be Eric Trump, wife of Senator for North Carolina, Lara Trump. Ooh. We haven't spoken much about Eric's wife, Lara, but she's a good sort, not a vicious Islamophobic racist at all, and that's because Islam is not a race. It's a religion.
That's good.
It's a trick question. And Lara is too smart to fall for it. Eric, who was a good-looking boy, and Lara were chained together literally at a private service at Mar-a-Lago almost 20 years ago now. So otherwise she'd sort of want to run away. But they've been chained together for a very long time. And the conjugal visits have slowed down in recent times, and that's only because when Eric is on the vinegar, he cries quite a lot and calls out for his dad. Love you, Dad!
That's good.
It would be a bit disconcerting for anybody, let's face it. But a marriage is not about sexual gratification.
No.
Eric and Lara remain intimate, but in a different way. Like when Lara pops on 3 pairs of surgical gloves and smears Eric's back with the ointment to keep his hypertrichosis at bay. That's werewolf syndrome, listeners. Daily wax treatments have helped, but Eric has a thick layer of hair covering 90% of his body. Red hair, which is unfortunate. And he does piss on the rug no matter how many times Lara takes him out for a walk. Yeah. Now, Lara Trump is a bloody good scout, and she only hits Eric with a rolled-up newspaper when they have company, and Eric's sitting on the floor licking his freckle. It's not nice, and people don't need to see Eric gobbing down his own dags. He knows it's wrong, and he's just being a very naughty boy. And a quick whack around the head with a copy of the fake news Washington Post normally has Eric sitting up straight, and if that doesn't work, he has to go outside and he'll stand at the door whimpering for the rest of the night until Lara can't take it anymore and lets him back in where he'll lie on the floor licking his own nuts. And you know how that goes, listeners. You would too if you could. Yep. But Lara's out on her own now, getting into the world of politics. It's interesting, isn't it, listeners? When we talk about the next Trump in politics, no one ever talks about Eric, who is a good-looking boy. Junior would probably be half a chance if he got off the gear for a moment, while Ivanka is a walk-up start. Even Barron, the oversized sideshow freak of a human being, is considered a prospect if he can just ward off the gigantism for long enough for his face to fit in the poster. But it's never Eric, who is a good-looking boy. It's never Eric. He's always overlooked, and my personal take on that is that it's got a lot more to do than just his leprosy and the autofellatio we talked about before. Lara, she's a gun and plans to primary in her home state of North Carolina with the full backing of Eric's dad. Love you, Dad! Lara and the Donald have been very close ever since Eric told the Donald he'd met the woman of his dreams, who, thank God, wasn't black, although the Donald thought for a moment she might be Puerto Rican.
Ooh, dangerous game.
Yeah, but Donald's given Lara the thumbs up, and that's a major endorsement. Lara's got the Klan vote stitched up, and really after that it's only a matter of time before we hear the words Senator Lara Trump and his wife Eric, seen here on a leash scratching 2 places at once.
Very good.
The Trump dynasty is on a roll, listeners, and it can only be good news for Eric, who is a good-looking boy, and he's just trying to be friendly when he humps your leg.
Oh, bless.
We need to give Eric a swift kick up the arse for now. Tell him he's been a very bad boy and rub his nose in it, whatever it is. It looks like pus, but it smells like shit. Anyway, I'm not sure what it is, but I'll be buggered if I'm going to pay his vet bills again. But we can't worry about that now because it's time to sit back and examine the rise to power of a man described by Paul Keating as, isn't he that cunt on the cooking show?
He is, yeah.
He's got the whiff of absolute power up his nostrils, or that could be ketamine. It's hard to tell, but at least he's having a go. It's the week in Senator-elect. Doesn't that sound great, listeners? The week in Senator, and possibly the greatest Prime Minister this country has never seen. The week in Pete Evans.
Yeah, thank Christ that he electorally actually cannot be Prime Minister. Just fucking imagine that. Just an envoy to China telling them that they're all corrupt dogs. Yeah, no thanks. Huge week in Pete Evans. Huge week in Pete Evans. Now, look, I'm guessing he drove down because you've got to wear a mask on a plane. And, we all know from Plandemic that gives you the COVID with that steely stare she gives. It gives you COVID. The autistic children just light up. So whether he flew, drove, or rode an activated arm in, Parliamentary Pete took a trip to Canberra. Now, he walked in with Rod Kellerton, who is doing his absolute fucking best to channel Bob Ellis by looking unkempt as fuck and just carrying luggage, which is just something Ellis used to do all the fucking time. It would appear that they were signed into the members' entrance by the one and only Crackers Craig Kelly.
Hey, Crackers.
Well, they stopped in to have a chat with and posed for a bunch of shit photos. If you look at the one in the lobby with these two, it looks like Cracker Kelly is a hedgehog that just had an orgasm. It's really good. Unfortunately, we don't know what they discussed, as Pete has so far resisted our attempts to microchip him through vaccines. But you can only imagine the painful dialogue between the two. But despite this, according to the New Daily, I don't know how the fuck they found this out, it seems this trip to Canberra is yet another attempt by Rod Kellerton to clear his name after getting the arse from Parliament 2 years ago for larceny charges.
And the bankruptcy. Don't forget the bankruptcy, Rod.
Don't worry. He's all over that. He wasn't convicted for the larceny charge when the damage was done. It was a very regrettable moment for old Rod. He got into an argument with a tow truck driver and threw his keys into a ditch.
Not a tow truck driver, Joe. I just want to clarify that. That was actually a collection agent. Someone, yes, basically the bailiff, and he grabbed the keys out of the ignition and popped them in his pocket for a while. There's the larceny conviction there.
Well, it didn't have any conviction, but this doesn't sound like, the sort of like the thing that larceny is. Mm-hmm. It sounds like some sort of random thing. But if you look at larceny in law, it simply requires you to grab something that isn't yours and move it.
That's exactly what it is.
The cops must have been super keen to charge him.
Yeah.
He's clearly ordered a hamburger with a lot, as you like to say. And the cops managed to dish him up, an order of chips, which is his larceny charge.
Well, we talked about Rod a little while back. He was under the High Court ruled that he was under conviction for larceny. They acknowledged that that conviction had been subsequently overturned, but he was under conviction during the campaign and thus was ineligible to stand. And of course, then there's the bankruptcy, which as we've discussed was current. He's an undischarged bankrupt, current as of 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
That's the one. So basically, you can just imagine the class and finesse of an angry Rod Cullerton dealing with the police after having a blue with a guy who I assume, was trying to tow his car. Turns out, collection agent. This is great. I wish I had footage of this, like a sob set, when they film themselves. It's fucking great. So it looks like instead of being a publicity stunt for Pete Evans, it was actually just Rod getting him to lobby people in Canberra to clear his name, like as if Pete Evans is somehow going to convince people in Parliament to wave a magic wand and take away his bankruptcy. I don't know what clearing his name involves because you discovered, as we said, that he's still ineligible for Parliament because he's an undischarged bankrupt. That's that.
That's it.
It's what can you do? It. So how about you clear your name by paying your fucking bills, massive gronk?
Yes.
Cullerton argues that his bankruptcy is in error, but as you discovered, the public register begs to differ.
Yes.
It's a bit weird. So instead of solving his financial problems like a normal person with some sort of arbitration or maybe sending a fucking check, he's figured that bringing down Big Smile Pete to Canberra might fix it. I just like...
I just got to ask you, Joe, was he wearing shoes? Was Pete Evans wearing shoes in the Parliament?
You know what? I hate to say it. He scrubbed up well.
And did he? I saw the photographs, of course, and I did see him with his little yellow visitors pass. You and I would have had visitors passes at the Parliament over the journey. I don't have one of those things on the lanyard, but he would have had his little visitors pass, and I just saw him I could just sort of see him thinking, have they got a gold one? Have they got a special one just for Pete Evans?
I want the special one. Yeah. I shudder to think, because the access that I used to get to Parliament House is fucking terrifying. Like, they shouldn't have given it to me. Like, I will say that on the record, they should not have given me that access. And I'm not going to mention who gave me that access because he's still in Parliament. But they should not have given Pete Evans unrestricted. He should have got the red one that I got when Obama was visiting that just says under escort. You know, just under a watchful eye. That'd be better. Yeah. But, so...
Don't let him go anywhere near Aussies. He'd just tear the place apart, wouldn't he? He'd just go, look at this crap. You can't have this. Get some Palau in there. Get some...
Apparently he had unsweetened green tea when Craig Kelly had a cappuccino.
Yeah.
Which is adorable. It's actually like, it's one of those humanizing things where it annoys me when Craig was like, he's a green tea guy, I'm a cappuccino guy. We have differences. We come together on certain things.
That's
I'm like,
right. Yeah.
Fuck you for being human. I almost feel like you're a person at this point. And, you can't satirize that.
Come on, John.
All right, let's get on with it. It would appear in Pete's big day, he also met with some tribal people of the Torres Strait. Fucking, why does he? But the thing is, he calls it that because of the OSTF. So in the usual manner, he's being vague as fuck about what this is, and I don't really want to speculate too much on it. There's a million reasons why I don't want to touch that hot fucking sausage. Yeah. But the chances of this being linked to the OSTF, which is the original Sovereign Tribal Federation, headed by a guy named Mick McMurtry, who convinces poor young kids to say soft shit, sit in court to try and get out of trouble, which gets them in more trouble. We've covered them vaguely before. The Aboriginal sob sits, it's really concerning the way that's leading, because that's a recipe for trouble.
Pete's on the path, you can tell. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, he's been invited to the Senate, so no problem. He got invited to fucking Parliament House, and he got in so easily. I mean, how hard could it be to get elected? So now, as an addendum to this week in Pete Evans, and it was a huge week, something slipped past me last week. Now, Pete, who's well known for his casual neo-Nazi leanings on social media. He posted a classy meme of two sheep fucking. And now, while Pete usually just mindlessly shares shit like slop in a tray, he started adding comments, which I'm not sure if this one is his work, but it looks like something he may have written on his Telegram.
Yeah, maybe.
It's a dangerous game, Pete. Your fit seems to fit perfectly in your mouth. The since deleted Telegram post states, do not breed with sheep, which is actually decent advice. I mean,
it is, it's illegal and all, bestiality.
Wow. Who let the law get in the way of love? So people who are vaccinated will have modified DNA.
This is what it says, right? So
strong start. This is the actual meme. No one discusses that DNA is passed on to the next generation. Here's a good bit. The risk that your children will marry into other cultures is possibly now shadowed by the fact that your child will marry into a COVID-vaxxed gene group, potentially shortening their lives and that of others. Reproduction and sterilization are also another big potential issue. This has not been researched or discussed enough. Wow. So at first it looks like a joke. Don't breed with sheep. Ha. Modified DNA.
So he's gone from your stock standard racism there to a sort of cellular racism.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
It's quite terrifying.
Yeah.
It's bizarre. So I'm not sure at what point this was a good idea.
I don't think it was.
And, he deleted the post. But holy shit, a fucking risk. I mean, while it's conditional release program policy to keep spouses and kids out of the frame here, this is a seriously disturbing insight into how he sees his children's future. What happens if they date a black fella? Is he going to go full fash on them? I mean, this is some seriously fucked up commentary. This should not be brushed aside. I missed this, and I can't believe I did. The good lads on Twitter at Cam Lives Here and Bothering Conspiracy Theorist at B Theorists, they got on top of this one. I did see the meme, but I scrolled past it. I just saw the sheep thing and thought, he's making a sheep joke again. Not looking quite close enough between the lines to see the race baiting in there.
Pretty damn ugly, yeah.
But I would say that he deleted it either because he's worried about the backlash, and someone pointed out, or the fucking himbo just didn't read it properly and shared it. That's plausible as well. I mean, I'll give him plausible deniability. He hangs out in some pretty disgusting circles, so it's unlikely that, it's quite likely that some Nazi shit's just going to pop its way in. But pushing the bullshit line that vaccine changes your DNA with this little hint of eugenics
that was
on top of the cake is exactly how Pete seems to like it, because he's a massive cunt.
So Paul Keating got that right. He is. Pete Evans is actually a cunt.
Really is.
A cunt from that cooking show, although that's not on anymore, so he's just a cunt. And you have been listening to the Conditional Release program with your host, Jack the Insider and Joel Hill. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. And if you've enjoyed our bullshit, throw us a 5-star review on your podcast app.
Jack can be found on Twitter on @JackTheInsider and Joel on @CrunchyMoses with a K. We've set up a Facebook page you can find fairly easily, and there's a shitposting group. If you look up Conditional Release program, shitposting group, you'll find it. You can post us some interesting stuff on there. It's a good chat. Now, promoting a podcast is easier said than done. Basically, we, stop short of paying people to listen to us. We're just begging. It's much nicer.
We're begging,
share our shit. Tell your friends. Get us out there. We notice. We're looking at the numbers, and they're bumping up slowly, but you're not doing it fast enough. Get on with it.
Yeah, look, I don't want to have to send Joel around to your house where he'll just knock on your front door and then just start begging, and crying quite a lot. And we just don't need that. It won't be good for his psyche and probably not for yours. So get on with it.
You'll see that Eric Trump is loosely revolving around my psyche.
And finally, all feedback, tips and death threats should be sent to the Conditional Release program @gmail.com. We would love to hear from you, even if you're looking after the Dodgers' business interests while he's having a holiday and you want to put two in both our brain stems.
Oh, I'll take one.
I'll take one too.
That's
Thanks, listeners. Catch you next week.
Thanks, listeners. See you then.